Hello everyone, and welcome. I'm going to do another quick essay here, talking about Marcion and Justin and some interesting little factoids I pulled out while having a conversation with ChatGPT 5. So I'm just going to get straight into it. And we're going to see where this goes. And a little addendum here as well. Many people will know this, but an addendum regarding Acts as well, which is linked to Luke, which is of course linked to Marcion, if we believe that Marcion's primitive copy of, has a primitive copy of Luke. So the identical sermon core in sequence, right? Justin Martyr's first apology, 15 to 17, contains 15 consecutive sayings of Jesus that mirror line by line those preserved in Marcion's gospel, the earliest form of what later became Luke's Sermon on the Plain. Both texts move through the same sequence: love your enemy, turn the other cheek, judge not, forgive, and you shall be forgiven, a tree known by its fruit, and the house on the rock. This perfect order alignment shows that Justin and Marcion drew on the same written gospel tradition, one earlier and shorter than canonical Luke. And this is Justin writing in the 150s. Shared simplicity and brevity in both Justin and Marcion. These sayings appear as crisp moral aphorisms without connective narrative or theological embellishment. Canonical Luke later adds stylistic polish and theological framing, introducing transitional clauses, balanced parallelisms, and the motivation of divine sonship. You will be son of the Most High. Matthew expands further, adding Old Testament citations and law-affirming commentary. Not one jot or tittle shall pass from the law. Justin and Marcion's version remain concise and unadorned, preserving the earlier oral or catechismal form of this teaching. This is very interesting and very important. Shared omissions and later additions. Briefly here, Justin and Marcion both omit key Lucan and Matthean expansions, the Beatitudes and Woes, Luke 6:20 to 26, and Matthew 5:3 to 12, the Golden Rule, Luke 6:31, lend expecting nothing, with the sonship motif, Luke 6:35b, and the storm parable ending, Luke 6:48 to 49. They likewise lack Matthean additions such as "be perfect as your Father is perfect," Matthew 5:48, the fasting, almsgiven prayer instructions, Matthew 6:1 to 18, and apocalyptic closes like "not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord," Matthew 7:21, 23. In all, roughly 20 brief clauses or sayings found in canonical Luke and Matthew are absent from both, indicating their shared source was a more compact, unembellished gospel form. Justin's four Matthean additions is quite interesting. Only in First Apology 17 does Justin introduce four sayings not in Marcion. Lay up treasure in heaven, where your treasure is, there your mind will also be, or be also. Do not take thought for tomorrow, and seek first the kingdom of God and its righteousness. These closely match Matthew 6:19 to 34, suggesting Justin supplemented his Marcion-type gospel with popular sayings already circulating in oral catechisms or early Matthean-style manuals, rather than quoting a complete canonical Matthew. And they all bunch at the end of Matthew here, so they're additions into Matthew, and not in Marcion at all. So they're just 1, 2, 3, 4 at the end of what Matthew otherwise says. Chronological and textual development. So these stages here: Marcion's Gospel, 120 to 140-ish CE, written about that time. Earliest written Gospel layer: short ethical discourses, no infancy narrative or heavy OT proof texts, Old Testament. Justin's memoirs, 150-ish CE in the 150s, uses the same core sayings, adds 4 Matthean aphorisms, still no name of any gospel though, or no named gospel. Canonical Luke 150 to 170 expands Marcion's text with narrative framing, theology, and Markan narrative material. Okay, canonical Matthew 160 to 180 builds on Luke, Judaizes the sermon, integrates extensive Old Testament references. Now, there of course, Matthew may have been before Luke. It's still not entirely known which I think actually Matthew comes a little sooner, but Marcion's gospel comes before Matthew. I think that's very clear to say. Why Mark does not factor? Okay, Mark lacks any parallel to the Sermon on the Mount or Plain. It focuses its narrative and miraculous, not ethical its focus is narrative and miraculous, not ethical discourse. This is Mark, yeah. The sermon materially Marcion and Justin derives from a sayings tradition, maybe it's mythology dependent on Mark, only later woven into Luke's hybrid gospel that combined Mark's narrative with Marcion's teachings. Okay, so the conclusion here, all lines of evidence converge on a simple historical pattern. Marcion's Evangelion first captured a concise ethical gospel. Justin's memoirs drew from the same text or a close sibling before the canonical gospels were named. Luke then expanded that tradition, adding narrative, theology, and rhetoric. Matthew followed, reshaping Luke's version into a Torah-affirming treatise. Therefore, Marcion and Justin preserve the earliest recoverable gospel layer, a short, moralistic collection of Jesus' teachings, later transformed into the grand theological narrative of Luke and Matthew. And then an addendum here, and I think this is quite interesting just to add. This is about Acts, this silence about Acts before Irenaeus. So if we're talking about Luke, we have to be talking about Luke and Acts, because they are Luke Acts, right? They're supposed to be written by the same person. But there's an interesting point here, theological point. No Christian writer before Irenaeus, 180-ish CE, shows any awareness of the Acts of the Apostles. Earlier figures such as Clement of Rome and Ignatius, Polycarp, Papias, the Didache, Shepherd of Hermas, Marcion, and even Justin Martyr never quote or reference its content. The first clear attestation appears in Irenaeus against heresies 3:14-15, where Acts is cited by name and attributed to Luke. And this silence indicates that Acts was a later Catholic composition, most likely emerging in the mid-2nd century alongside canonical Luke as part of the anti-Marcionite project to harmonize Peter and Paul and root Christian authority in Rome. Its absence from both Marcion's canon and Justin's writings reinforces the sequence proposed here. Marcion's Gospel, Justin's memoirs, Luke and Acts, and then Matthew, or the other way around, but it doesn't really matter. What is, I think, extremely interesting is that we can go through Luke's sayings here from the Sermon on the Plain, and we can see how they are added to, they are embellished, they are expanded. Okay, so Luke is expanding quite consistently what Justin is saying here. Marcion's gospel preserves what Justin is saying far closer, sometimes copying verbatim. That would show you that even though Justin has a pop at Marcion in Apology, I think, in one of the Apologies, it's still his words here still preserve, and this is one of the clusters that's the most historical Jesus dense, and it's the Sermon on the Mount, right, or the Plain. Similar, obviously these are different in the canonical traditions, but they contain the same same sayings, but it shows you here again a wonderful thing. If we're looking strictly at what we can find about the readers of the Gospels, what they are saying, and there aren't many before 180, then Justin looks like he's preserving Marcion and not the canonical texts. And Justin, a Christian for many years in Rome, or around Rome, pretty well situated guy, still doesn't know the Gospels in his time, doesn't reference them, only can talk about memoirs of the apostles called Gospels, no other knowledge, and even his birth narrative is extremely sparse, and it doesn't jive with the canonical format there. He mentions, for example, Jesus being born in a cave, which doesn't jive with either of the Gospels. So this is much more likely to be an oral tradition somehow that's being conveyed here, a catechism from who knows where, probably quite close to Justin's time, because we have no other evidence of anything else. And of course it bolsters the notion that first and foremost Jesus, or Christ, was celestial, and by Justin's time he still doesn't know so much about the gospel tradition. Over and out.